The new girl slandered my friends with lies against me. My friends dumped me, but a year later they regretted it. Let me start at the beginning. When I was 16, I wasn't what you would call a social butterfly. I had always struggled to make friends in school. It wasn't that I was unfriendly or rude. I simply couldn't find anyone who shared my interests. I've always been fascinated by things most of my peers found either too nerdy or outright boring. Things like niche hobbies, obscure internet culture, or old video games. Back then, these weren't exactly conversation starters, so I became known as the odd one out. I was that weird kid in class, and I learned early on to keep my interests to myself. Things changed for me, though, when I stumbled upon a Facebook meme group. I can't even remember how I found it. It was one of those random recommendations that popped up, but in that group, I connected with a small circle of people who lived a few miles away from the town I grew up in. There were 4 of them. And even though we started off as just casual commenters on each other's posts, it wasn't long before we formed our own private chat. I'll never forget how that felt. For the first time in a long time, I found myself part of something where I didn't have to pretend or hide who I was. There were 4 of us, and despite our differences, we clicked almost immediately. For context, 2 of the guys were the same age as me. One was 2 years older, and the youngest was 2 years younger. It might sound like a weird mix, but the age gaps didn't matter. We bonded over everything, from sharing memes to talking about the most random and personal aspects of our lives. It felt like we were a family of brothers. I can honestly say that even now, I've never felt such a strong connection with any group of friends. They were everything to me. Then, as luck would have it, we connected with another group of people online. This time, a group of girls. They were all around my age, and we clicked in much the same way. I won't lie, at first I had a crush on one of them. I mean, how could I not? She was funny, intelligent, and shared so many of the same interests. But as we got to know each other better, I realized we were better off as friends. That wasn't a bad thing, though. It actually made our bond strong. We became one big, intertwined friend group, and it felt like nothing could go wrong. Then, about a year into knowing the girls, someone new joined their group. She was different from the others. Quirky, with a sharp sense of humor that was both endearing and cutting. Let's call her Cindy. Cindy was complicated. At first, I didn't know what to make of her. She had this magnetic energy that drew people in, but there was also an edge to her, something that made me feel like I needed to tread carefully. Still, she fit into the group, and over time, we all adjusted. She was part of our world now. Fast forward 2 years, and life brought all of us together in a new way. After high school, we had all decided one by one to move to the same city. For most of my friends, the move was about college, pursuing their dreams and degrees. For me, it was a bit different. I had always been drawn to the business world, particularly sales and marketing. I wasn't interested in a traditional college experience. Instead, I focused on securing an internship. Where I'm from, internships are relatively easy to come by as long as you have decent grades and a high school diploma, which I did. So, I set my sights on that path. Within 2 years, I had landed a job with decent pay, and I was still studying online, working toward an even better future. During those 2 years, the dynamics of our group shifted. Meeting people online is one thing, but hanging out in person is another. At first, it was awkward. Conversations that flowed effortlessly in chat felt stilted face to face, but we pushed through it. And soon enough, it felt like we'd known each other forever. We had inside jokes, favorite hangout spots, and endless shared memories. Even Cindy became part of those moments, though I hadn't spent as much time with her in person. She didn't strike me as someone who held grudges or harbored ill will. On the contrary, we seemed to get along quite well. Then came the night that would change everything. It started with a simple message from Cindy. She told me she was at a park and wanted to hang out. Apparently, one of the girls from our group had an emergency and had to leave, leaving Cindy alone. She said she didn't want to be by herself and asked if I could come over to keep her company. At the time, I had just finished my shift and was on my way home. I wasn't planning to go out again, but something about her message made me feel like I should go. It wasn't late, about 9 in the evening, and the park she mentioned was a well-known spot, busy even at that hour. So I said yes. When I arrived, Cindy seemed genuinely happy to see me. We spent the next 2 hours talking, laughing, and being goofy. We called some of our other friends, took silly pictures, and just enjoyed each other's company. It felt like a normal, fun evening. At around 11, Cindy suggested we head back to her apartment. She said we could hang out there, have some coffee, and continue the conversation until midnight. It was an odd suggestion, but I didn't overthink it. She even called her roommate to let her know she was bringing someone over. The roommate asked a few questions, and Cindy assured her everything was fine before hanging up. At the time, it seemed like a casual, considerate thing to do. When we got to her apartment, her roommate was just leaving. I remember thinking it was a strange coincidence, but I shrugged it off. Cindy made us coffee and we sat down, continuing our chat. We even snapped a few more pictures to send to our friends. It was lighthearted, Normal, nothing unusual. After about half an hour, she asked if I wanted to head home. I told her I was a bit tired from the long walk to her apartment and that I'd stay a little longer. We talked for a bit more and then I left. I said goodnight. She waved me off and that was it. Or so I thought. The morning after that evening at Cindy's apartment, everything seemed different. I didn't notice anything right away. But when Cindy messaged me in our group chat, her tone was distant. It wasn't the usual playful banter we had shared the previous night. At first, I thought she was just having a bad day. Maybe something personal was weighing on her. I asked if she was okay, but her replies were curt, almost cold. Something was definitely off. Over the next few days, her behavior became increasingly strange. She stopped engaging in our usual group conversations, and when she did speak, it was brief and lacked her typical energy. The others noticed it too, but nobody said much. I figured she was dealing with something and didn't want to pry. Then, out of nowhere, one of my closest friends from the group left our chat. It was a complete shock. He was one of those people you could always count on. Steady, loyal, and not the type to make rash decisions. I tried messaging him directly to see what was wrong, but he didn't respond. When I checked again a few days later, I saw that I had been blocked. My confusion quickly turned into worry. Was something serious happening in his life? Did I do something to upset him? I had no idea. Things escalated from there. One by one, the members of our group began leaving the chat and blocking. At first, I thought it was some bizarre coincidence, but as the days went on, it became clear this wasn't random. Even the girls from the other friend group, including Cindy, blocked me without any explanation. It was as if I had become a pariah overnight. The only person who didn't ties with me was the oldest member of our group, the one 2 years older than us. He finally reached out saying he needed to talk. I was desperate for answers and agreed to meet him. When we sat down to talk, the first thing he said was, "I need you to be honest with me." He looked serious, almost grim. I nodded, unsure of where this was going. He then told me that Cindy had accused me of trying to assault her that night at her apartment. The words hit me like a freight train. My first reaction was disbelief. "What?" I asked, thinking I must have misheard him. He repeated it, explaining that Cindy had told everyone in the group that I had made inappropriate advances toward her, tried to grab her, and refused to leave when she told me to. She claimed that I had only left after she threatened to call the police. I was stunned. The events of that night replayed in my mind, and nothing, absolutely nothing, matched the story Cindy had told. I explained everything to my friend, from the moment she invited me to the park to the coffee and conversation at her apartment. I described how I had left on my own after saying goodnight, and how nothing unusual had happened. My friend listened intently and said he believed me, but then he dropped another bombshell. The rest of the group had already taken Cindy's side. Apparently, Cindy had reached out to each member of the group individually, telling them her version of the story and urging them not to confront. She claimed to be terrified of me, saying that if they questioned me, it might provoke me into doing something harmful. She even told them she was to the sky and had been self-harming because of the trauma I had caused her. It was a masterfully constructed lie, and they had all bought it without hesitation. I thanked my friend for believing me, but I told him not to bother defending me to the others. I had already made up my mind. If they were so quick to abandon me without even asking for my side of the story, they weren't real friends. They didn't deserve my trust or loyalty. In the weeks that followed, I tried to move on, but the betrayal deep. These were people I had considered brothers and sisters, people I thought would always have my back. Losing them felt like losing a part of myself. I withdrew from socializing, focusing instead on my job and online classes. It wasn't easy, but I told myself that I didn't need people who could so easily turn against me. Years passed, and the pain dulled, though it never fully went away. Then, out of the blue, one of the girls from the group reached out to me. Her message was short and direct. "Is it true? Did you really do what Cindy said?" At first, I laughed bitterly. Why was she asking me this now, after all this time? I replied, asking why she suddenly cared. She told me that Cindy had shown her true colors, and that the rest of the group had finally realized how manipulative and deceitful she was. Apparently, Cindy had burned bridges with everyone, betraying their trust in ways I couldn't have imagined. There were rumors about her sleeping around, lying about serious issues, and using people for her own gain. Eventually, they all ties with her. I told the girl my side of the story, the same account I had given to my one remaining friend all those years ago. She was horrified. She apologized repeatedly for believing Cindy and for cutting me off without giving me a chance to explain. I told her I had already forgiven her and the other girls because we weren't that close. I understood why they had sided with Cindy at the time. But as for the three guys, the ones I had considered my closest friends, I told her I could never forgive them. She said she understood. We caught up a bit, but the conversation left me with mixed feelings. On the one hand, it was vindicating to know that Cindy's lies had finally caught up with her. On the other hand, it brought back all the pain of losing my friends and being unjustly accused. I later learned that Cindy had spiraled into self-destruction. She became addicted to sweets and threw away her nursing career. All her closest friends had abandoned her, and she was now a shadow of the person she had once been. Part of me felt pity for her, but another part felt a grim satisfaction. Karma, it seemed, had done its job. As for my old friends, they tried reaching out to me through mutual acquaintances, but I turned them down every time. I couldn't bring myself to forgive them. The betrayal was too deep, and their silence in the face of Cindy's lies spoke volumes. They had made their choice, and so had I. To this day, I don't fully understand why Cindy did what she did. Was it jealousy? Some twisted need for attention? I may never know. What I do know is that her actions left a lasting scar on my ability to trust others. Should I take legal action against her? Part of me thinks I should, if only to clear my name officially. But another part wonders if it's worth the emotional toll. As for forgiving my friends, I doubt I ever will. They made their decision when they abandoned me, and I've made mine. What would you have done in my shoes? Would you forgive, forget, or fight back? I'd love to hear your thoughts.